So good day everyone. The topics to be discussed for today are the laws related to juvenile justice system. So for our learning objectives, at the end of the lesson, the student should be able to know the history of juvenile justice system and acquire knowledge in the important provisions of the laws related to juvenile justice system. So for the history of juvenile justice, the modern practice of legally separating adult and juvenile offenders can be tracked back to two developments in English or England custom, as well as the law of England or English. So that occurred centuries ago. So the development of poor laws and the creation of the English or Chancery courts. Both were designed to allow the state to take control of the lives of needy but not necessarily criminal children. So this system was brought to the United States where it was developed further until later it became the basis of the juvenile justice system in the Philippines. Or in the Philippines, we can call this as principle of parents patriae. Kasi po yung history of juvenile justice system is na-adapt lang po natin from English or England customs and laws. So the four laws was being introduced in 1535, statutes which mandated the appointed of overseers who placed destitute or neglected children with families who then trained them in agricultural domets of France. So as you still recall, yung domets of France, they focus only in training the young offenders in agriculture, trade or domestic services. This practice is called indenture. So in 1601, a system was created wherein church workers with the consent of justice of the peace identified vagrant, delinquent, and neglected children and took measures to put them to work. So these children were placed in workhouses until their adulthood. Doon lang po sila hanggang sa ma-reach nila yung adulthood, hanggang sa ma-reach nila yung age of majority. So for the American system, middle-class civic leaders who refer to themselves as child savers began to develop organizations and groups to help alleviate the burdens of the poor and immigrants by sponsoring shelter care for youths. So educational and social activities and the development of settlement houses. So this was called the child saving movement. So the practice of indenture, which is I've cited a while ago, and chancery courts in England were adopted by the states of Virginia, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, wherein they are under, of course, of the American system. However, those youths who committed serious criminal offenses continued to be tried in the same courts as adults. So, if you still recall again, dun sa mga previous topic natin, na yung treatment for young offenders is the same as the treatment for adult offender. But as time goes by, nagkakaroon ng changes kung saan mas napaprioritize na yung mga bata rather than adult. So, they are responsible for creating a number of programs for indigent youths, including the New York House of Refuge, a reformatory which began operations in 1825. So, the first comprehensive juvenile court was established in Illinois in 1899 through the passage of the Illinois Juvenile Court Act of 1899, which set up an independent court to handle criminal law violations by children under 16 years of age, as well as the care for neglected, dependent, and wayward youths. So kasi po, yung mga age of majority dati, di ba? 16 years old. Pero, habang tumataas na yung age of majority. Pero sa Philippines, ang age of majority is 18 years of age. So the purpose of this act was to separate juveniles from adult offenders and provide a legal framework in which juveniles could get adequate care and custody. So the Congress passed the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act of 1974. So what is the Juvenile Court? It is a court that has original jurisdiction over persons defined by statute as juveniles and alleged to be delinquent or status offenders. Of course, under din sa mga juvenile court, sila din yung nagtatried ng mga cases ng mga bata. Sila din yung tumutulong para para mabilis maproseso yung mga kaso ng bata. So the development of juvenile justice in the Philippines. So these are the laws related po sa juvenile justice. Pa-take note po ako ng laws or patandaan na lang po sa mga laws na related sa juvenile justice system. So aligned are PD 603 or the Child and Youth Welfare Code, RA 6809, Law Amending the Age of Majority, Executive Order 209, the Family Code of the Philippines, RA 7610, Anti-Child Abuse Law, RA 8552 or Domestic Adoption Act, the Inter-Country Adoption Act, RA 8043, RA 9208, Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act. So yung Inter-Country Adoption Act, Domestic Adoption Act, kasama yan kasi may mga trafficking in persons na involve yung mga youth offender or yung mga youth natin. Then RA 9231, Law Amending RA 7610 on Working Children. Then RA 9255, Law on the Use of Father's Surname of Illegitimate Children. RA 9262, Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act. Law Amending the Laws on Adoption, RA 9523, RA 9344, Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act, RA 9775, Anti-Child Pornography Act, and Republic Act of 8369, the Family Courts Act of 1997. So, yung the act which strengthens the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act is RA 10630. Yung amendment po ng RA 9344 or which strengthens the RA 9344 is RA 10630. Additional lang po ha. And then the important provisions of PD 603. We have Child and Youth Welfare Code, which is approved on December 10, 1974, which is effective date or the effectivity date is from June 10, 1975, 6 months after approval, and shall apply to persons under 18 years of age. So, parental authority or patria potestas. It is the sum total of the rights of the parents over the person and property of their child. So, the exercise of which has no distinction between a legitimate and an illegitimate child. So, parental authority, the father and the mother shall exercise jointly just and reasonable parental authority and responsibility over their legitimate or adopted children. So, in case of death of either parent, the surviving parent shall exercise sole parental authority. And in case of disagreement, the father's decision shall prevail unless there is a judicial order to the contrary. So, parental responsibility of course, the parents. Parental responsibility, it is the sum total of the duties and obligation of parents over their minor children. Then for the liabilities of parents, parents and guardians are responsible for the damage or injury caused by the children under their parental authority. Kaya nga po meron tayong RA 7610, yung exploitation, child abuse, which involve the liabilities of the parents, na kapag sinaktan nila yung mga bata, yung anak nila, meron sila magiging kaso. Then for the legal custody, in case of separation of parents, no child under 7 years of age shall be separated from his mother unless the court decides otherwise. Pwede naman po yan as long as napagdesisyonan po sa korte, lalo na po kapag walang minsang nanay para palakihin yung bata at wala silang shelter, walang trabaho, at wala siyang maibibigay para sa anak niya. Then guardianship, a trust relation of the most sacred character in which one person called a guardian acts for another called a ward, regarded as incapable of managing his own affairs. So, termination of parental authority. Kailan ba natin masasabi na kailangan ng i-terminate ang pagiging authorized nyo as parents? So, upon adoption, upon appointment of a guardian, upon declaration of abandonment of the child or parental authority, upon final judgment of a competent court divesting the party concerned of parental authority, or upon judicial declaration of absence or incapacity of the person exercising. So lahat po ng yan is dadaan po sa korte. Hindi po yan mangyayari, hindi po kayo magkakaroon ng termination of parental authority without agreement from the court. So, suspension of parental authority. Kanina, termination. Tinanggalan na kayo ng parental authority. And now, suspension. Suspended lang po. Kailan ba magiging suspended ang parental authority? So, conviction of a parent of a crime which carries with it the penalty of civil interdiction. Treating the child with excessive harshness or cruelty, giving the child corrupting orders, counsel, or example, compelling the child to beg or subjecting the child, or allowing him to be subjected to acts of lasciviousness. Yun po yung time kailangan nating i-suspend yung authority nyo as parents. Lalo na po yung number 5. Kapag po in-involve nyo yung mga bata sa acts of lasciviousness, kasi marami sa atin ngayon or marami sa napapanood natin na balita na kung sino pa yung parents, sila pa yung nagbubugaw sa mga anak nila para kumita ng pera. So, substitutive parental authority, take note yung GOR, G-O-R, grandparents. Oldest brother or sister at least 21 years of age. Yan lang po yung mga pwedeng mag-substitute as your parents or as authorized parents. Relative who has actual custody of the child or guardian duly appointed by the court. Ma'am, paano po pag hindi po siya na-appoint ng court pero considered siya as guardian? Kasi siya yung nag-iintindi. Again, duly appointed by the court. Na kahit hindi po yan appointed, hindi po siya pwedeng mag-substitute as parental authority, or she or he is not authorized to be your parents or substitute parents. Commencement. So, in addition lang po pala sa substitute parental authority, in case of absence or death of both parents, substitute parental authority shall be given to the following. Of course, pinakamahalaga na yung grandparents, lalo pag nabubuhay pa yung grandparents nyo. Pero pag wala na, dun sa mga natirang anak, or kung ayaw naman ng mga natirang anak, yung mga relative, basta po ay appointed by the court. Kasi pag hindi siya na-appoint ng court, hindi rin po authorized na mag-substitute as parental, as your parents or as your guardian. And then for the commencement of civil personality, the civil personality of the child shall commence from the moment of conception. So what do we mean by conception? So conception is the start of life. It is of course the union of sperm cell and the egg cell, also called the process of fertilization. So the civil personality shall commence from the moment of conception Thus all children shall have the right to be born and the right to live. That's true. Yung mga bata po ay bata pa lang, kakapanganak mo pa lang, is meron ng right. Which is right to be born. Hindi ka pa na ipapanganak pero you have the right to be born. And kapag naipanganak ka na, you have the right to live. Ayan. Which pertains also to identify and recognize of an individual as person having rights. Again, yung rights nga po sa civil personality, which are rights to be born if hindi pa naipapanganak, and kapag naipanganak na, right to live. So, abortion is the expulsion of the fetus from the mother's womb. So, kinds of abortion, we have criminal abortion, which is classified as intentional, which is according to Article 256 of the Revised Penal Code, or unintentional from Article 257, and it is punishable by law. When we say therapeutic abortion, ito na po yung gumagamit kayo ng mga manghihilot para magpalaglag. And then, it is recommended and performed by a certified physician when there is a health risk and complication, which is complicated lang po yung sa part po ng nanay. Pero kung hindi po certified physician ang gagawa niyan, lalo na po walang health risk and complications na involved, you are, pwede ka pong makasuhan or you violated a law from abortion. Pwede po yung intentional, pwedeng unintentional. They will fall under criminal abortion. Hindi na po siya mako-considered as therapeutic kung wala naman pong intention or health risk complications. So, not punishable by law, avoidance of greater injury. So, important provisions of the laws on adoption. Adoption is an act by which relations of paternity and filiations are recognized as legally existing between persons not so related by nature, the taking into one's family of the child of another, so a son or daughter and heir, and conferring on it a title to the rights and privilege of such. So adoption, kailangan lang po niyan ay may filiations po between the mother and father ng bata na i-adapt or ipapa-adapt. Of course, with agreement under the attorney or the law or under the court. Para po mas maganda yung agreement kasi hindi naman maganda yung usap lang, lalo na't wala kayong hahawakan na papel. Kasi possible na dumating yung time or sooner or later magkaroon ng demandahan. Then filiation, it is the acknowledgement of the father of his relationship with the child, also called paternity. Relationship between the father and the child is called filiation. Then biological child, natural born child of the parents, adopted child, a child who underwent the judicial process of adoption. Fondling refers to a deserted or abandoned infant or child whose parents, guardian, or relatives are unknown. Sila po yung mga itinatapon lang po or nakikita nyo nakasilid sa mga sako, sa kahon, na nilalagay sa mga gate or iniiwan kung saan-saan. Their parents or relatives are unknown. They are called fondling. So, legal classification of children. So, we have legitimate, illegitimate, and legitimated. Of course, adopted. Kasama na rin natin sa legal classification yung adopted child or children. So, when we say legitimate, born inside the marriage. So, yung pinanganak ka na ang parents mo ay both married. Then, illegitimate, born outside the marriage, pinanganak ka that your parents are not yet married or out of wedlock. Pag sinabi nating out of wedlock, not married. So again, for legitimate, para hindi kayo malito, pag legitimate, pinanganak ka, nakasal na yung parents mo. Pero ang illegitimate, pinanganak ka na hindi pa kasal ang parents mo. And then, how about legitimated? They are illegitimate child raised by the status of a legitimate child by subsequent marriage of his parents. Pinanganak ka ng outside marriage, which means pinanganak ka ng wala pang kasal na nangyayari. illegitimate ka pa. Hindi pa kinakasal ang parents mo, pinanganak ka na. And then, nagpakasal si parents mo after mong ipanganak. After, of course, after mong lumabas, after kang maipanganak, nagpakasal na yung parents mo. That is legitimated. From illegitimate na naging legitimated. Legitimated na siya in a way na naipanganak ka na kasi, and then, outside the marriage, you are born outside the marriage. Diba? Pag you are born outside the marriage, illegitimate ka. And then, nagpakasal si parents mo after ka maipanganak. That is legitimated. Then, for adopted, person who is raised the status of legitimacy through adoption. Merong juridical act. As I've cited nga, kailangan may agreement at dumaan sa procedure. Then, RA 8552, the Domestic Adoption Act of 1998, which is approved on February 25, 1998. So, the adopter, the person adopting or petitioning for the adoption of the child, adoptee, the child or person being petitioned for adoption. So, yung 8552 later on, i-attach ko dun sa file na isa-send ko sa inyo or sa presentation na isa-send ko so that you will be able to understand it clearly and briefly. So, child placing agency or institution. So, it refers to the private non-profit institution or government agency duly accredited by the DSWD that receives and processes applicants to become foster or adoptive parents and facilitate placement of children eligible for foster care or adoption, or yung MYRC. So, yung MYRC is called as Manila Youth Reception Center, wherein it provides the court with social data for proper evaluation and disposition of cases of children under center's authority or under center's custody. Na kapag under ka ni center, papasok ngayon sa MYRC. They are responsible for that, the Manila Youth Reception Center. Then, who may adopt? Any Filipino citizens of legal age at least 16 years older than the adoptee. For example, ang adoptee mo is 14. Dapat 16 years older. It means 30 years old. Pwede ka nang maging adopter. Unless the adopter is the biological parent of the adoptee, or is the spouse of the adoptee's biological parents, which is accepted or exempted from the rule. So, any alien, foreigner, possessing the same qualifications as that of a Filipino citizen who has been living in the Philippines for at least 3 consecutive years. So, kapag hindi pa po siya nakakatira sa Philippines ng at least 3 consecutive years, they are not eligible to, or they are not qualified to be a adopter, and whose country has diplomatic relations with the Philippines. Kasi kapag wala silang engagement sa Philippines, hindi rin po siya considered as adopter, or hindi rin po siya qualified as adopter. Who may be adopted? A Filipino child legally declared available for adoption whose age is below 15 years old. It means 14 years old and below are required or qualified to be adopted. So, RA 8043, the Inter-Country Adoption Act of 1995, which is approved on June 7, 1995. So, inter-country adoption, it is the social legal process of adopting a Filipino child by a foreigner or a Filipino citizen permanently residing abroad where the petition is filed. So, the supervised trial custody is undertaken and the decree of adoption is issued outside the Philippines. So, the Inter-Country Adoption Board acts as the central authority in matters relating to inter-country adoption. Kasi, hindi naman po mabubuo itong inter-country adoption kung wala pong inter-country adoption board. They are also responsible, or they shall act as the policy-making body for purposes of carrying out the provisions of RA 8043 in consultation and coordination with the DSWD. Kasi kung walang consultation sa DSWD, bali wala lang po yung gagawin nilang legal process or process doon sa Filipino child na ia-adapt ng isang foreigner. It is intended, itong RA 8043, intended lang din po ito sa mga foreigner na gustong mag-adapt ng mga Filipino citizen or Filipino child. So, where to file the application? It shall be filed either with the Philippine Regional Trial Court or the Inter-Country Adoption Board through an intermediate agency in the country of the prospective adoptive parents. So, it was being supervised by the trial custody and shall be at least 6 months. So, important provisions of RA 7610. So, RA 7610 is the Special Protection of Children Against Child Abuse, Exploitation, and Discrimination Act, which approved on June 17, 1992, and this law is also commonly referred to as the Anti-Child Abuse Act. So, if the parents abuses their child or their children, lagi nilang sinasaktan, laging pinagsasabihan ng masasakit na salita, they are under the supervision of the Republic Act 7610. Kapag hindi nila tinigilan yun, pwede po siyang makasuhan ng RA 7610. And then for RA 7658, which is amendment of RA 7610, approved on November 9, 1993, and this law amended the provisions of RA 7610 regarding working children. So when we say amendment, meron lang pong part sa law na binago, or hindi man po siya binago ng buo, pero meron pong konting changes. Nagkaroon ng amendment. That is amendment. Kaya po, kung naiisip nyo ng RA 7610, pinalitan ng RA 7658 ang RA 7610, no po. May provisions lang po na nabago. Kaya po nagkaroon tayo ng RA 7658. So, this law was further amended. So, na-amend ulit ng RA 9231, which means sa RA 7658 na nabagong provisions is may nabago pa din. That is RA 9231. So, again, let's proceed with child abuse. It refers to maltreatment, whether habitual or not, of the child. So, clearly stated naman po, child abuse, maltreatment, na kapag continuously na sinasaktan mo yung bata, yung anak mo, na yan nga po sa picture, nagkakapasana, tapos you are not giving them the right treatment, that is considered as child abuse. So, forms of child abuse, we have cruelty, physical injury, psychological injury, neglect, sexual abuse, and child prostitution. So, when we say cruelty, it refers to any word or deed which degrades or debases or degrades or demeans the intrinsic worth and dignity of the child as human being. So, kapag masyadong mo nang na-downgrade ang isang bata, that is called cruelty. Physical injury, which includes but not limited to lacerations, fractured bones, burns, internal injuries, severe injuries, or seriously bodily harm suffered by the child. So, physical injury, nasaktan mo lang siya physical, sinapok mo, sinipa mo, that is physical injury. Pero kung dumating ka na sa na-fractured mo na yung mga katawan niya or yung mga loob ng mga buto niya, ibang case na po yun. Psychological injury means harm to a child's psychological or intellectual functioning, which may be exhibited by severe anxiety, depression, withdrawal, or outward aggressive behavior. So, kung ang bata is lagi niyong sinasaktan, laging nakakarinig ng mga kung ano-anong salita, bukod sa nada-downgrade sila, naapektuhan din yung emotional feeling nila. Like, yung to the point na mas naiisip nila lagi yung mga sinasabi ng parents nila, natatakot tuloy silang lumabas na baka yun din yung masabi sa kanila ng ibang tao. And then neglect, failure to provide the means of the child or the basic needs of the child like yung food, clothing, medical care, shelter, and basic education. Then for sexual abuse, it includes the employment, use, or inducement of the child, or you are engaging your child in sexual intercourse or lasciviousness conduct. Nagkakaroon din ng pamomolestya, prostitution, or incest with the children. Yung incest, kapag yung parents or yung mga relatives mo mismo, yung nang tolerate sa'yo or nang molestya sa'yo. Nagkaroon ng acts of lasciviousness sa'yo. Next, child prostitution, exploitation of children, whether male or female, by coercing them into indulging in sexual intercourse or lasciviousness conduct for money, profit, or any other consideration. So, for the child prostitution, hindi lang po yan lagi babae. Pwede din pong lalaki yung nakaka-experience ng child prostitution wherein ginagamit nila kayo to earn money or to earn profit. And then yung profit na yon, sila lang po yung magbe-benefit. Wala po silang pakialam sa bata kung naagrabyado na ba yung bata, kung nasasaktan na yung bata, as long as kumikita sila ng pera. Next, the important provisions of RA 9208, which is the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act of 2003 and approved on May 26, 2003. So, trafficking in persons, yung recruitment, transportation, transfer or harboring or receipt of person with or without the victim's consent or knowledge. So, when we say trafficking in person, the purpose of it is to exploit, of course, of child or children and considered as trafficking in person if it does not involve any of the means set forth in the preceding paragraph. So as cited po, naandyan naman po yun, nagkakaroon ng forced labor, services, slavery, servitude, or removal or sale of organs. Kung nababalitaan nyo dati na kinukuha yung mga bata, yung mga organs, kinukuha, binebenta, trafficking in persons na po yan. Na kapag nag-across na sila within the national borders, trafficking in person. So, I hope that you have the knowledge with regards to trafficking in person since ilan na po yung law-related subject natin dito sa criminology. So, work permit of working children, it shall be the duty of the employer to secure permit from the dole of working children employed by him. So, in addition po sa trafficking in person, I remember yung qualified trafficking in person. So, paano nga ba nagiging qualified yung trafficking in person? So, when the offender is an ascendant or yung parent ng isang bata. Pwede din pong guardian ng isang bata who exercise authority over the trafficked person or when the offense is committed by a public officer or employee. Kung sila po yung mga gumawa ng pagiging trafficked person mo, sila po ay liable as qualified trafficking in person. Then, to be continued, employment contract of working children. The contract shall be signed by the working child's parent or legal guardian with the express agreement of the child. So, working hours of the child. If the child is under 15 years of age, he or she may work for maximum of 4 hours a day. So, take note po, kapag daw po yung bata is under 15 years of age, maximum of 4 hours a day lang po sila pwedeng magtrabaho. 20 hours a week, which means sa 5 days, 4 hours lang po ng 4 hours per day. May work between 6 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the evening, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Pero ang required lang po niya per day is 4 hours per day. Ang required time lang po niya per day is 4 hours. So, if the child is 15 but under 18, he or she may work for a maximum of 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and may work between 6 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock in the evening. So, 8 hours per day, which means the overall per week is 40 hours. So, trust fund, at least 30% of the earnings, and the use of child's income, not more than 20% may be used for the collective family needs. Kasi po yung kita ng bata is kailangan po is for the benefits lang po ng bata. Hindi po yan pang kabuhayan ng pamilya. Next, prohibition of the employment of children in certain advertisement. No child shall be employed as a model in any advertisement directly or indirectly promoting the following: alcoholic beverages, intoxicating drinks, tobacco and cigarettes, gambling, any form of violence or pornography. So, hindi naman maganda na kapag sa advertisement, mga bata yung mag-endorse ng alcoholic beverages, ng intoxicating drinks. Pangit tingnan sa image ng isang bata na ganun yung makikita sa television or mga advertisements. So, important provision of RA 9262. So, when we say RA 9262, it is the Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act of 2004, which is approved on March 8, 2004. So, the violence against women and their children. So, it refers to any act or series of acts committed by any person against woman who is his wife, former wife, or against a woman with whom the person has or had a sexual or dating relation. So, in short, violence against women and their children, ito lang po is yung pag-abuse po. As long as nagsuffer po ng emotional abuse, psychological harm, or nagsuffer ang isang babae, ang isang asawa, at lalo na kagagawa ng husband niya, that is under po the violence against women and their children. And they are required to face the consequences that will be given for him under the court. Siyempre, hindi ka naman basta kakasuhan ng walang approval ni court. Philippine Juvenile Justice System, which is RA 9344, the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act of 2006, approved on April 28, 2006, and has been effective on May 20, 2006. Repealed the provisions of the Revised Penal Code and Presidential Decree Number 603 on minor offender. So, repealed, ibig sabihin, binago niya. Binago niya yung buong provisions ng Presidential Decree on minor offenders, ng PD number 603 on minor offenders lang po. Then, important terms introduced by RA 9344 is the Juvenile Justice System. Juvenile Justice System refers to system dealing with children at risk and children in conflict with the law, which provides child-appropriate proceedings including programs and services for prevention, diversion, rehabilitation, reintegration, and aftercare to ensure their normal growth and development. So, for the children at risk, they are only child who are risk in committing crime. For example, they are doesn't have enough money to as income of their parents kasi walang income yung parents nila, therefore they will be lacking for financial resources. And then si child risk siya in committing crime since wala nga silang pera, walang means of income, or kung may income maliit lang yung nakukuha ng parents, pwede pong maging risk yung isang child. Pwede kasi siyang makakommit ng crime na dahil sa kahirapan, dahil hindi mabili ang kanyang mga gusto, ay makagawa siya ng illegal acts. So, for children in conflict with the law, they are child who already committed an offense. Then, again, yung offense committed by minors is called status offense. So, restorative justice refers to a principle which requires a process of resolving conflicts with the maximum involvement of the victim, the offender, and the community. So it seeks to obtain the reparation of the victim, reconciliation of the offender, the offended, and the community, and reassurance to the offender that he or she can be reintegrated into the society. Restorative justice is to restore yung bata para ma-resolve yung conflicts na nagawa niya or ma-resolve yung nagawa niya pagkakamali. That is the purpose of restorative justice. So again, child at risk who is vulnerable or risk in committing crime dahil may mga factors nga na nagiging dahilan bakit sila nagiging risk. Personal, family, and social circumstances. So child in conflict with the law, their child who already committed an offense. So, initial contact with the child. So, initial contact with the child refers to the apprehension or taking into custody of a child in conflict with the law by law enforcement officers or private citizens. Ito po yung kung sa adult, directly apprehension na siya or arrest of the suspect, dito naman po ang tawag is initial contact with the child, yung pag-apprehend sa kanila. Kung si adult, directly arrested na yung term nila, arrested sa juvenile justice system or sa mga youth, ang tawag po sa pag-arrest or apprehended or apprehension sa kanila is initial contact with the child. Intervention refers to series of activities which are designed to address issues that caused by the child to commit an offense. So, intervention, nandyan lang po yung mga which is based on the best interest of the child. Yung mga activities na pwede niyang ma-involve para po ma-cure siya or ma-treat ang isang bata. Para din ma-determine kung ano yung naging issue or naging cause kung bakit niya nagawa yung isang crime. Ano yung mga pwedeng i-address na issues kung bakit nakaka-commit ng child ang isang bata. Kung bakit nakaka-commit ng crime ang isang bata. So, again, intervention which is based on the best interest of the child. They include activities na pwedeng makakatulong upang matreat ng isang bata. So, diversion refers to an alternative, child-appropriate process of determining the responsibility and treatment of a child in conflict with the law on the basis of her social, cultural, economic, psychological, or educational background. That is, without resorting to formal court proceedings. So, diversion program refers to the program that the child in conflict with the law is required to undergo after he or she is found responsible for an offense without resorting to formal court proceedings. So, kung intervention kanina, nasabi natin, which is based on the best interest of the child for the diversion program, ang basis po nito para sa in determining responsibility and treatment for the child is her social, cultural, economic, and psychological and educational background. Then, yung program naman na pwedeng undergo under diversion is kung saan yung child pwedeng ma-cure based dun sa offense na nagawa niya. Of course, magbabase tayo sa social status ng bata or sa cultural status ng bata, kung saan siya nanggaling, ano yung nakagisnan niyang culture, ano yung mga nagagawa niya dati, dun tayo magbe-base sa kanya. Kasi hindi naman tayo natin pwedeng ipasok na lang siya sa isang treatment na hindi naman akma dun sa nagawa niyang crime at hindi akma dun sa basis na pwede nating pagdetermining ng responsibility or ng treatment ng isang bata. Youth Detention Home refers to a 24-hour child caring institution managed by accredited local government units and licensed or accredited non-governmental organization providing a short-term residential care for children in conflict with the law who are awaiting court disposition of their cases or transfer to other agencies or detention. Youth rehabilitation, same lang po sila na 24-hour residential facility which is also managed by the DSWD, local government units, and a licensed or accredited non-governmental organization which is monitored by the DSWD as well, which provides care, treatment, and rehabilitation services for children in conflict with the law. So the difference is that in youth detention home, short-term lang po yan. Pero pagdating natin sa youth rehabilitation center, long-term po yan. Pwede din po 24-hour residential care facility wherein mas nabibigyan kasi ng mahabang treatment ang bata sa youth rehabilitation. Unlike youth detention home, home means parang sa bahay lang, short-term na nangyayari natin na residential care. Pero sa youth rehabilitation center, center po yan wherein dito na po mas naku-cure or natitreat ang isang bata. So we have also community-based program. So community-based program refers to the programs provided in a community setting developed for purposes of intervention and diversion as well as rehabilitation of the child in conflict with the law for integration into his or her family and or community. Community-based program, pwede po yung bata sa community niya tapusin yung sentence niya, but hindi naman siya totally sentence, pero pwedeng yung bata is nasa community, pero may supervision din po ng mga authorized person, as well as nung mga DSWD na pwedeng mga laga sa mga bata. So, rights of the child in conflict with the law, stated po dyan yung mga rights ng child. Right not to be imposed a sentence of capital punishment or life imprisonment. Right to be detained or imprisoned as a disposition of last resort, which shall be for the shortest appropriate period of time. Right to be separated from adult offenders at all times during detention while being transported to and from the court and while waiting for the hearing. Right to be detained only with other detainees of the same sex if detention is necessary. So, if kailangan talaga ng detention, kailangan same sex lang po yung pagdedetainan sa mga bata. And dati po kasi yung mga bata, dinedetain sila kasama sa mga adult offenders. Pero dahil nga po nagkaroon ng passage of laws, nagkaroon ng rights yung mga bata at mas nabigyan ng pansin yung mga bata ay pwede siyang ma-detain as long as kailangan talaga siyang i-detain. Pero kung hindi naman, kung pwede naman siyang ma-treat, ay papalayain siya pero may supervision pa din. Pero kung hindi siya talaga kayang i-cure, hindi siya kayang i-treat, no choice na po but to detain. But in the same sex. Hindi po siya pwedeng mapasama sa lalaki. For example, lalaki ka, isasama ka sa babae, babae ka, isasama sa lalaki. Hindi po pwede. Kahit naman po sa mga adult offender, hindi rin po sila pwedeng magsama. Unless meron nga po silang mga rights, lalo pag mag-asawa, yung conjugal rights po nila. Right to be searched only by a law enforcement officer of the same gender. Right not to be handcuffed when such is not necessary. The right to have his parents or guardians present. The right to diversion if he or she qualified and voluntarily avails of the same. Right to automatic suspension of sentence. So, sa automatic suspension of sentence, If the child in conflict with the law is found guilty of the offense charged, the court shall place the child under suspended sentence without need of application kasi automatically yung bata is-suspended na sila sa sentence nila. Unless nga po, gaya nga po nung nabanggit kanina, right to be detained only with any other detainees, the same sex, if detention is necessary. Kung kailangan lang po talagang ma-detain ng isang bata as long as not curable na siya or cannot be treated, kailangan na po siya ma-detain. Pero, again, right po ng bata is to have a automatic suspension of sentence. The right to probation as an alternative to imprisonment if qualified under the probation law, and the right to have the records and proceedings involving him be considered privileged and confidential. So, the minimum age of criminal responsibility. So, a child 15 years of age or under at the time of the commission of the offense shall exempt from criminal liability, but shall undergo intervention program. So again, yung intervention program, it is the individualized treatment program which may include counseling, skills, training, education, and other activities that will enhance his or her psychological, emotional, and psychosocial well-being. While a child above 15 years of age but below 18 years of age shall likewise be exempt from criminal liability if he or she acted without discernment, but he shall undergo intervention program. So, kung 15 years old ka or under at the time of the commission of the offense, exempt ka sa criminal liability. Pero mag-undergo ka ng intervention program. As well as kung above 15 years ka, but below 18, which means 15 to 17, exempt sa criminal liability. Pero kung hindi ka nag-act without discernment ka doon, acted without discernment, intervention program. However, they are exempted only from criminal liability and not from civil liability. Lahat po ng commit ng crime na bata, exempted lang po sila sa criminal liability pero hindi sa civil liability. A child above 15 years of age but below 18 years of age who acted with discernment shall be subjected to the diversion proceedings and shall undergo diversion program if qualified. So, nabanggit naman natin kanina, what do we mean by diversion program? So, a child above 15 but below 18 years of age who acted with discernment and who is not qualified for diversion or refused to undergo diversion shall be prosecuted. Kasi, kapag hindi ka nag-undergo ng diversion, lalo na't kailangan mong ma-cure or ma-treat, directly ka na po mapoprosecute. Kasi tinanggihan mo na po yung diversion program. Wherein, kapag ka ikaw ay na-qualified for diversion, pwede kang ma-treat doon, wala kang criminal record. At the end of your judgment, at the end of your sentence, wala kang criminal record. Pero kung ikaw ay hindi qualified for diversion at ni-refuse mo pa yung pag-undergo ng diversion, you will be prosecuted. So, system of diversion. Children in conflict with the law shall undergo diversion proceedings subject to the following conditions. The imposable penalty for the crime committed is not more than 6 years imprisonment. Take note po ha, ito po yung mga pwedeng mag-undergo ng diversion program. In victimless crimes, the imposable penalty is not more than 6 years of imprisonment. In cases where the imposable penalty exceeds 6 years, diversion measures may be resorted to only by the court. Depende na po yun sa court kung ipag-undergo nila ng diversion o directly na po sila sa prosecution process. The diversion proceeding shall be completed within 45 days. So, contract of diversion. shall be preferred if the child is qualified for diversion and voluntarily admits the commission of the act, and the parents or guardian of the child and the child himself agrees to the diversion program. Pero kung wala pong agreement na nangyari, wala pong contract of diversion. Hindi rin po siya qualified for diversion program. It must be signed by the child parents or guardian and the authorities concerned. And for the prosecution, if ever na hindi siya mag-qualified for diversion, a child in conflict with the law shall undergo prosecution if not qualified for diversion. He is qualified for diversion, but he or his parents or guardian does not agree to diversion. Diversion is not appropriate for the child in conflict with the law based on the social worker's recommendations. So, the conduct of preliminary investigation. There shall be a specially trained prosecutor to conduct the inquest, preliminary investigation, and prosecution of cases involving children in conflict with the law. Kasi meron kasing, pag hindi specially trained yung prosecutor, may mga bata kasi na hindi talaga kayang mag-open. Wherein, kung trained yung prosecutor na mapunta sa isang bata, pwede niyang malaman kung ano yung weakness or ano yung strength na isang bata para mapagsalita niya or mapaamin niya. So, the information against the child shall be filed before the family court within 45 days from the start of preliminary investigation. So, the court proceedings, during trial, the court shall order release of the child on bail or recognizance to his or her parents and other suitable person. That is what we call the community-based program. If the child is to be detained, the transfer of the child to youth detention home, detention of the child shall be ordered only as a last resort. So, kung kailangan talagang ma-detain yung child, kung kasi malala yung bata, parang medyo matagal pa bago ma-treat, kailangan maipadala po sa youth detention home or youth detention center ang isang bata. That will be the last resort for court proceedings. Then for probation, a child in conflict with the law whose sentence was executed by the court upon reaching the maximum age of 21. So probation lang po, it applies po kapag yung bata is na-prosecute, nahatulan ng korte. So, was executed by the court reaching the maximum age of 21 shall be entitled to the benefits of probation under PD 968, the probation law of 1976. Pero take note, yung probation lang po is only given once. Kapag ikaw ay nagkaroon ng nakakommit ng crime more than 6 months or under 6 months, 6 months, you will not allowed to undergo or to give probation, because probation is only given once. Take note, only given once lang po ang probation. So, offenses not applicable to children, persons below 18 years old shall exempt from prosecution for the following crimes: vagrancy and prostitution under the revised penal code, anti-mendicancy under PD 1563, sniffing of rugby under PD 1619. So, anti-mendicancy, yan yung mga vagrants, yung mga humihingi ng mga pagkain, humihingi ng pera dun sa mga kalye. So, important provisions of RA 9775. RA 9775 is the Anti-Child Pornography Act of 2009, which approved on November 17, 2009. So, the law that amended the provisions of RA 7610 on obscene publication and indecent shows. So, it aims to protect every child from all forms of exploitation and abuse through the use of child in pornographic performances and materials, and the inducement or coercion of a child to engage or to be involved in pornography. So, yung Additional po sa probation law, di ba nakulong na siya and then i-discharge na yung bata. So, in discharging the child in conflict with the law, it is upon the recommendation of the social worker who has custody of the child. So, the court shall dismiss the case against the child if the court finds that disposition measures have been fulfilled. Pero kung hindi siya na-fulfilled ng bata, wala pong discharging na mangyayari. And then, again, ire-return po yung bata sa korte or sa lot or yung child in conflict with the law sa korte. So, if the court finds that the objective of the disposition measure imposed upon the child have not been fulfilled, or if the child has willfully failed to comply with the conditions of his or her rehabilitation program, the child shall be returned to court for the execution of judgment. So, yun po, kapag hindi na po talaga napigilan yung bata, automatically, he or she will be executed judgment. So, for the Anti-Child Pornography Act of 2009, ito po yung law na tumutulong sa mga bata, lalo na mga na-engage sa mga pornographic performances, which is very in demand naman ng mga nakaraang taon or ng mga previous news na mababalita nyo, kung saan yung mga bata is binebenta ng mga magulang nila pampalit utang. Kumbaga, wala silang means na pwedeng pagkakitaan, wala silang pera, and then end up gagamitin nila yung bata or yung anak nila in exchange po sa pambayad ng utang. Gagamitin nila yung anak nila doon. And then, pwede naman pong ma-engage nila yung bata for their own profit or for their own benefits. So, child in conflict with the law. So, ito po, to summarize natin. So, with child in conflict with the law, we have 15 years old and below. They will undergo intervention. Sundan nyo lang po yung sinasabi ko. Child in conflict, and then over 15 but under 18 acted without discernment. Over 15 but under 18 acted with discernment. So, yung pong child in conflict with the law na 15 years old and below and over 15 but under 18 acted without discernment, mag-undergo po sila ng intervention. And then over 15 but under 18 acted with discernment, diversion program if qualified. So, prosecution if disqualified from diversion. Ito po ay yung pinaka-summarize lang po ng mga nabanggit natin kanina. And then CICL is over 15 or child in conflict with the law which is over 15 but under 18 acted with discernment, undergo diversion proceedings. So, if sa diversion proceeding, kung ang CICL ay qualified, may mag-undergo po siya ng diversion program. And then, if the CICL is disqualified, undergo po siya ng prosecution. So, sa prosecution, magkakaroon ng preliminary investigation. And then, after ng preliminary investigation, information is filed in the family court. Bakit po family court? Kasi po family court po yung korte na applicable po para sa mga bata. And then, conduct of trial. So, again, ulitin natin, child in conflict with the law, pag 15 years old and below, over 15 but under 18, which is acted without discernment, intervention program. And then, pag over 15 but under 18, acted with discernment, which is pag qualified, diversion program. So, pagka hindi siya qualified, prosecution. And then, kapag yung CICL is over 15 but under 18, acted with discernment, undergo sila ng diversion proceeding. And if qualified yung CICL, undergo siya ng diversion program. Pag hindi po siya qualified, of course, disqualified siya, undergo siya ng prosecution. Sa prosecution, meron diyang preliminary investigation. And then sa preliminary investigation, magfa-file ka ngayon ng information sa family court. And then, conduct of trial. Ito na po tayo sa trial. So, sa trial, if the CICL is found not guilty, he is discharged. So, if CICL is found guilty, his sentence is suspended. So, dito muna tayo sa conduct of trial na kapag CICL is found not guilty, he is discharged, and then he has no criminal record, or the CICL has no criminal record. If sa conduct ng trial is not guilty na siya, wala po siyang criminal record. Pero kapag ang CICL is found guilty, his sentence is suspended kasi nga bata pa siya. And then, CICL is detained at the Youth Rehabilitation Center until maximum age of 21. So, kung nakagawa ka ng crime ng 16 years old, and then you are found guilty, your sentence is suspended. Pwede ka mag-undergo ng community-based program, or you will be detained in the Youth Rehabilitation Center until you reach the age of 21. So, eto na. Naka-reach ka na ng age of 21. So, deemed rehabilitated, he is discharged. CICL has no criminal record, which means that kung sa rehabilitation center pa lang, bago niya ma-reach ang age of 21, na-rehabilitate na ang bata, madi-discharge siya. And then, wala siyang criminal record. Pero kung ang bata deemed not rehabilitated, original sentence is executed. Kung na-reach niya yung age of 21, hindi pa rin siya nare-rehabilitate, original sentence is executed. And then, CICL is transferred to an agricultural penal farm. Kasi nga po, di ba yung mga bata is required to work. Pero 4 hours lang, may limited lang na oras para sa mga bata. Then, CICL has criminal record. Therefore, yung ending, may criminal record. Nandyan po, again, clearly stated na yan sa conduct ng trial natin, kapag ka ang CICL daw is na-detained at wala pa siyang age ng 21 years old, is na-rehabilitate na siya, wala na po siyang criminal record, madi-discharge siya. Pero kapag siya ay na-reach na yung age na 21 years old at hindi pa rin siya na-rehabilitate, meaning original sentence will be executed and then they will be transferred in the agricultural penal farm. And meron po siya ngayong criminal record. So, additional sa syndicated, sa child pornography pa din, yung syndicated child pornography, hindi ko siya nabanggit, wherein it was being committed by a group of 3 or more person conspiring on confederating with one another. So, if yung child pornography is nangyari or ginawa ng group of 3 or more than 3 persons, syndicated child pornography po ang pwedeng maipataw sa kanila na violations or na case. So again po, this is the summary of our topic na na-discuss ng buong finals. So sa child in conflict with the law, kapag tandaan nyo lang po yung without discernment, with discernment, kapag 15 years old and below, above 15 years old, kailan ba sila magi-intervention, kailan ba sila mag-diversion. So that's all po. Thank you and God bless.